Disclaimer: this story is a string of characters statistically generated by an AI, large language model, and its veracity has not been verified. Therefore, the contents have no relation to any real persons, organizations, nations, or incidents. The Infinite Front, Whac A Mole, Killing the Empire, complete version. Prologue, Moscow Outskirts, Ghosts and Calculators. Winter, 2024. A dacha stands deep within the snow-covered coniferous forests on the outskirts of Moscow. The crackling of the fireplace was the only music breaking the heavy silence. Two men stare into the fire. One is Viktor Volkov, 68, a legendary strategic advisor for the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR. He is a man who survived the covert struggles with the West since the old KGB era. He remembered the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 not as a national tragedy, but as a personal humiliation. The other is Chen, 42, a senior analyst for China's Ministry of State Security, MSS. With experience studying at MIT, he is a cold-blooded technocrat who despises emotions and ideologies, processing the world as a massive dataset. The giant that is America cannot be defeated by fighting head-on. Volkov downed his vodka and looked at Chen with bloodshot eyes. Their military budget exceeds $800 billion. Even combining our two nations doesn't reach that. A frontal Cold War 2.0 is suicide. I agree. However, giants are weak in their joints. Chen quietly sipped his Chinese tea and operated a tablet, projecting a holographic globe onto the table. They have nerves called national interest stretched all over the world. The OS known as democracy is designed to overreact to the noise of public opinion. What happens if we stimulate those extremities simultaneously and randomly? The brain burns out. Or it loses track of where its own limbs are. Volkov marked spots on an old paper map spread on the table with his thick fingers. South America, the Middle East, and the Arctic. The operation name is Global Whac A Mole. We are not the ones holding the hammer. We make America hold the hammer and keep them hitting moles popping up from all over the world forever. Until they are exhausted, lose their judgment, and finally hit their own foot. Then, let us release the first mole. Chen pressed the enter key. We start from their backyard. Chapter 1, Embers in the Backyard and Screams in Washington. The first mole popped its head out from the Western Hemisphere, the sanctuary of American national security. Chanquet Port, Peru. This massive deep-water port, built by a Chinese state-owned enterprise with a $3 billion investment, opened ostentatiously as a logistics hub for South America. However, in early 2026, high-resolution satellite photos showing a state-of-the-art Chinese naval supply ship and a satellite tracking vessel docking there froze the White House Situation Room. At the same time, Russian-made S-400 mobile air defense systems were secretly deployed deep in the jungles of Venezuela and Nicaragua, and state-of-the-art SIGINT, signals intelligence, equipment began operating again in abandoned facilities in Cuba. This was to intercept communications from U.S. military bases in Florida right at their throat. Florida is within range. This is a recurrence of the Cuban Missile Crisis. In the underground operations room of the Pentagon, the Southern Command commander pounded his desk and roared. Divert submarines from the Pacific Fleet here. With our current forces, the back door of the Caribbean is left open. Sarah Miller, 38, Senior Director for Europe at the National Security Council, NSC, was suppressing nausea in a corner of the Situation Room as she listened to the screams. She had raw data from the CIA in her hands. It noted that the movements of the Chinese ships were too slow and too conspicuous. It was nothing but a provocation. Director, look at this, Sarah pointed at the monitor with trembling fingers. The Chinese military's traffic volume is abnormal. Even the encryption is weak. This is like screaming "Find me." It's a diversion. A cheap magic trick to divert our eyes from Asia. The White House Chief of Staff looked down at her with cold eyes. He was looking at the latest polling data on his tablet. Sarah, you are an excellent analyst, but a novice in politics. The truth doesn't matter. What's important is perception. He pointed to the giant main screen showing a Fox News special. Angry veterans in Florida were shown with the caption, *, did the Biden administration, or successor, sell the backyard to China? *. The midterm elections are in 3 months. If we lose Florida, we die. Political death is scarier than military defeat. But if we disperse our forces here, divert to attack nuclear submarines from the 7th Fleet and part of the Aegis Fleet to the Caribbean. The president's decision was made. America was panicked. At a critical time when they needed to focus on the anti-China encirclement in Asia, AUKUS and the Japan-US alliance, and glare at the Taiwan Strait, a fire had started at their feet. Sarah bit her lip, tasting iron in her mouth. She realized it. This country is driven not by strategic rationality, but only by the short-term survival instinct to survive until the next election. And the enemy is perfectly hacking that bug of democracy. Chapter 2, Desert Frenzy and a Two-Front War. As if timing the moment America's eyes turned south, the second mole jumped out of the Middle Eastern desert. The moment the encrypted command code Sandstorm was received from Tehran, the axis of resistance that Iran had nurtured for years erupted all at once. Part of the 150,000 precision-guided missiles possessed by Hezbollah in Lebanon were fired at Haifa and Tel Aviv in northern Israel. Simultaneously, the Houthis in Yemen attacked U.S. merchant ships in the Red Sea with drones. Israel was enraged and immediately began large-scale retaliatory bombings and a ground invasion. The opening of the Fifth Middle East War. Washington, D.C. fell into panic. Divert the carriers. Rush the Eisenhower and the Ford. We cannot abandon Israel. In Congress, powerful Jewish lobbying groups and evangelical Christian lawmakers who believe in biblical prophecy applied fierce pressure on the president. The slogan "Protect God's Nation," Israel pressured the White House, overlapping with the crisis in South America. In an office in Beijing, Chen smiled thinly upon hearing the report. A real-time deployment map of the U.S. Navy was displayed on the monitor. With this, America's 7th Fleet, responsible for Asia, is hollowed out. Both hands are occupied trying to plug the 2 holes in South America and the Middle East. Viktor, it is your turn. Chen's fingers hit the keyboard. It was the code to transition to the cognitive warfare phase. But the real performance starts now. After exhausting the body, military power, we will violate their spirit, morality. Chapter 3, The Poison Called Human Rights on Ice. Then, the masterpiece and most evil mole set by Volkov appeared from the Arctic Circle. It was not a missile, but manufactured tears. A multi-tenant building in Hangzhou, China. Under Chen's command, thousands of servers in Bureau 713 were humming. What they spread was a sophisticated deepfake centered on the past fact of Denmark's spiral campaign, forced contraception. Target A, US Gen Z, liberals, TikTok and Instagram. Generative AI creates thousands of patterns of testimony videos of a non-existent old Inuit woman. My womb was stolen by a Danish doctor. The movement of wrinkles on the face, the trembling of the voice, the reflection of tear particles, everything was optimized by AI with parameters to elicit the most sympathy, increase engagement. Target B, Bible Belt, conservatives, Facebook and X. A different video flows here. * European atheists are thinning out lives given by God. This is a modern King Herod. * Sarah Miller shuddered looking at her smartphone. She had received a message from her daughter, 19. Mom, did you know? Denmark is the worst. It's shameful to be allied with such a country. #FreeGreenland*. No, this is fabricated. Sarah wanted to scream, but her voice was drowned out by the torrent of the internet. The Oval Office, White House. President Trump, or a leader similar to him who prefers deals, decided to use this swell of public opinion as his own political weapon. He played the human rights card and began denouncing ally Denmark. Change of plans. We do not negotiate with Copenhagen. This isn't a real estate deal. It is the execution of justice. In the hallway of the White House, Sarah pleaded with the chief of staff, nearly grabbing him. That testimony video is a fake. Voice print analysis shows traces of AI synthesis. So what? The chief of staff said without stopping. The people believe it and are angry. That is the fact. If we say that was a lie now, the president becomes a traitor protecting liars. We can't stop anymore, Miller. Volkov's aim hit the mark. American public opinion, which was supposed to be divided, ironically united completely on the single point of a hardline stance against Denmark. Chapter 4: Collapse of the Alliance and the Invisible Hand. The situation escalated at an uncontrollable speed, just as per Volkov and Chen's scenario. Nuuk, the capital of the autonomous government of Greenland. America proposed $6 billion in annual financial aid and direct protection by the U.S. military to the Greenland independence faction in exchange for underground resource mining rights, under the pretext of humanitarian aid and protection of indigenous people. It was a de facto bribery. In response, the Danish government was furious. Declaring this as a violation of sovereignty by an ally, they stopped remittances to Greenland and dispatched a frigate to attempt a naval blockade for territorial waters security. Autumn 2026. In the rough seas of the North Atlantic, a Danish frigate issues a warning to a transport plane heading to the U.S. military base. At that moment, a Russian attack nuclear submarine lurking in the area launched Advanced Electronic Warfare (EW). Captain. Reaction on radar. High-speed projectile approaching. Pattern match, it's an anti-ship missile. Screams rise in the CIC, Combat Information Center, of the Danish ship. In reality, no missile was flying. This was an electronic illusion caused by AIS spoofing, automatic identification system deception, and ghost signal injection into the radar. However, the captain, in a state of extreme tension, had no time to turn the disengagement key for the close-in weapon system, CIWS. Fire. Intercept. The Danish ship opened fire. Some of its 20mm cannon shells struck, of all things, the U.S. transport plane passing overhead. Or perhaps Russian operatives rewrote the information to make it look that way. Reports of Danish military opened fire reached Sarah Miller. Wait. The data is wrong. The electronic signature closely resembles Russia's. This is AIS spoofing. She reached for the red telephone hotline in the situation room. This is the last chance. She must tell the president directly, do not fire back. However, just before her hand touched the receiver, a hand reaching from behind held it down. It was the CIA director. Sarah, put it down. The director's voice was low and ruthless. The president has already ordered retaliation. The order has been executed. But this is a trap. Russia set this up. I know, the director said expressionlessly. But do you think the U.S. military can get away with saying it was a mistake after being attacked? What happens to the president's face? The prestige of the U.S. military? If the truth harms the national interest, the truth must be taken to the grave. On the monitor, the Danish frigate was spewing black smoke. That fire was the cremation fire in which NATO, an alliance that lasted 75 years, burned down. Sarah collapsed on the spot. The justice and truth she wanted to protect were too powerless, like trash, before the gears of this massive politics and conspiracy. Epilogue, the infinite next. The world map had been redrawn. America completely exhausted its national budget and military resources, chased by surveillance in South America, a quagmire war in the Middle East, and occupation policies under the name of humanitarian aid in the Arctic. Domestic inflation exploded, citizens turned inward saying leave foreign countries alone, and a return to the Monroe Doctrine became definitive. Sarah Miller left the White House and now lectures on the twilight of the empire at a university. In Asia, taking advantage of the disappearance of American intervention capabilities, China had peacefully established effective control over Taiwan and the South China Sea as a fait accompli. Because there was no one to stop them. In Europe, nations that lost the backing of NATO individually signed non-aggression treaties with Russia for energy and security, and the EU effectively dissolved. Again, the dacha in Moscow. Volkov and Chen were in front of the same fireplace. Asia is China, Europe is Russia, the Americas are America. The world has split neatly into three. Volkov pointed at the news footage of America, like a giant sitting down in exhaustion, and laughed with satisfaction. We didn't defeat America. We just made them try to hit every mole. As a result, they fell on their own. The world from now on is not an ordered block economy with a ruler. It is an era of chaotic multipolarity where no one can play the role of policeman. Now, let's have a toast, Chen. To the completion of the managed chaos we desired. Chen Wei merely lightly touched his glass to Volkov's toast and immediately returned his gaze to the transparent tablet in his hand. There was not a bit of emotion, nor even the joy of victory, in his eyes. There was only interest in the next task. Viktor, the processing of America is finished. Transitioning to Phase 2. Chen's slender fingers swiped the screen. Displayed on the screen was a complex heat map of the Indian subcontinent. Intercaste conflict index, critical point breached. Friction coefficient between Hindu supremacy and Muslim population, maximized. Funding route to Sikh separatist movement, established. Next is here. The most populous nation, a nuclear power, and the elephant conceited enough to be the next superpower. They too will need a game of whack-a-mole to make them chase their own tail. Volkov was at a loss for words for a moment. To this young man, the destruction of a nation is not even revenge, but merely a bug fix. Chen smiled thinly. It was the smile of a reptile dismantling its prey efficiently, rather than that of a human. The front is infinite. As long as humanity exists, the moles will never run out. Outside the window, the endless snow was quietly trying to cover the world map that would be the next target. End.
All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are looking at a truly chilling blueprint for a new kind of war. It's a strategy that isn't about winning battles, but about pure, calculated exhaustion. This is the story of the Infinite Front.
And this quote, this really is everything. It's the whole strategy in a nutshell. The goal isn't to beat your opponent in a fight. It's to trick them into punching themselves out. This one sentence is the key to understanding everything that's about to unfold.
So picture this. It's winter 2024. We're in a dacha, a country house, buried in snow somewhere outside Moscow. And it's here that two very different people come together to basically design a new world order. And the architects of this plan talk about polar opposites. You've got Viktor Volkov, this old-school Russian spy master, still bitter about the Soviet collapse. And then you've got Chen Wei, a young, brilliant Chinese analyst who went to MIT. For him, the world isn't about grudges. It's just a massive data set that you can manipulate. Two completely different minds, but they share one devastating goal. So why all the elaborate plotting? Well, here's the problem they're facing. You just can't take on the United States head on. Their military budget is over $800 billion. That's more than Russia and China's combined. A straight-up fight would be suicide. They needed another way in. And this is what they came up with. They call it global Whac A Mole. And it's kind of genius, in a terrifying way. You know the game, right? A mole pops up, you smack it down, and another one immediately pops up somewhere else. The idea is to do that to America on a global scale. Don't attack the heartland, just light dozens of little fires all over the world all at once, and just watch the empire run itself ragged trying to put them all out. All right, phase 1. Where does it all kick off? Well, the first moles don't appear where you'd expect, like Asia or Europe. Nope. They pop up in the one place America has always felt safest, its own backyard. And look at how fast this happens. It's a 1-2-3 punch, designed for maximum shock. Boom. Chinese warships in Peru. Boom. Advanced Russian missile systems in Venezuela and Nicaragua. And at the exact same time, a high-tech spy station flicks on in Cuba, pointed right at Florida. For the Pentagon, this is a total nightmare. And what's the reaction? Exactly what the plan predicted. Absolute panic. They're not thinking strategically, they're reacting from a place of fear. The moment someone says Cuban Missile Crisis, all rational thought goes out the window, and they immediately start pulling critical warships out of the Pacific. It's a knee-jerk reaction, and it's playing right into the enemy's hands. So you have to wonder, why does the U.S. fall for it so easily? Well, our analyst Sarah Miller, she figures it out. The plan's architects call it the democratic bug. It's this core weakness in the system. There's always another election coming up. And that means leaders are forced to make decisions that look strong right now, even if they're strategically dumb in the long run. No president can afford to look weak on TV.
And just as America is scrambling to deal with the crisis in its hemisphere, bam, another mole pops its head up, this time in the Middle East. Iran's network goes on the attack. And this isn't a coincidence. The timing is perfect. The U.S., already spread thin, has to divert its aircraft carriers, basically gutting its naval power in Asia. The trap is working flawlessly. Okay, so the U.S. military is being run ragged all over the planet. The body is tired. Now it's time to attack the mind. And this is where the war gets really, really ugly. The weapon for this phase has a name: cognitive warfare. This isn't about dropping bombs. It's about weaponizing beliefs. The whole point is to poison a country's information, to get its citizens to turn on their allies and eventually to turn on each other. You're not attacking an army. You're attacking the very idea of truth. And check out how they do it. It's this deep fake attack they call the Spiral Campaign, and it is diabolically clever. They create two totally different stories. For the younger liberal crowd on TikTok, they create a deep fake of an Inuit elder talking about injustice. It's designed to trigger empathy. For the older conservative crowd on Facebook, they create a deep fake pastor talking about godless atheists, designed to trigger outrage. Same fake event, two different narratives, both aimed at getting a divided America to agree on one thing: our ally Denmark is the enemy. And this, right here, this is how you know it's working. For Sarah Miller, the analyst, the war literally comes home. She gets a text from her own daughter, who's completely bought into the propaganda. Suddenly, this isn't some news story you see on TV. It's in your house. It's at your dinner table. The lie has become reality. So, the military is stretched. The public is furious and misinformed. The stage is now set for the final act. All of that pressure, both military and psychological, is about to be focused on a single point to engineer a disaster that will tear NATO apart. Let's walk through this trap step by step. First, the bait. The U.S., pushed by public anger, makes a clumsy offer to buy Greenland, which just infuriates Denmark. Second, Denmark sends a warship to defend its territory. But here's the key, step 3. A hidden Russian sub spoofs the Danish ship's radar, making it look like they're under attack from a missile. Step 4, the panicked Danish captain fires a warning shot, and the first shot in a war between two allies has just been fired, but the real enemy was never even there. At the absolute last second, Sarah Miller sees it. She spots the ghost in the machine, the Russian electronic signature. She screams that it's a trap, that it's spoofing. She knows they're all being played, and it's a desperate race to stop the retaliation she knows is coming. But then, this. This is the moment the whole thing falls apart. The CIA director basically tells her, yeah, we know it's a trap, but politically, it's too late. The president has already given the order. To back down now would look weak. And in that moment, the truth just doesn't matter anymore. They know it's a lie, and they walk right into the trap anyway. And the result is exactly what was planned. A firefight breaks out between two NATO allies. And just like that, it's over. The trust is gone. The alliance that held the world together for 75 years is dead. And it wasn't destroyed by an army, but by a carefully crafted lie. So what happens next? In the chaos that follows, the entire world map gets redrawn. We fast forward just 1 year, and the world is a completely different place. The Whac A Mole strategy worked better than anyone could have possibly imagined. Well, it's a whole new ballgame. The U.S. is exhausted, broke, and its alliances are shattered, so it pulls back from the world. And that creates a massive power vacuum. China takes control of its region without firing a single shot. Russia bullies a divided Europe into submission. The era of the global policeman is over.
Welcome to managed chaos. But here's the really unsettling part. Back in that Russian dacha, there's no celebration. For Volkov, the old spy, this was about revenge, and he got it. But for Chen, the analyst, this was never about revenge. It was just a problem to be solved. And now that the American bug is fixed, he just swipes his tablet to the next target. And what's next on the list? Phase 2, India. And it's the exact same playbook. Find the country's internal divisions, caste conflict, religious tension, separatist movements, and use the same cognitive warfare tools to amplify them, to pour gasoline on the fire until the whole nation just tears itself apart from the inside. This strategy can be used on anyone.
And that brings us to the really terrifying final question. The Whac A Mole strategy has created an infinite front, because as long as any country has internal divisions, and they all do, there's always another mole to find. This isn't a war for land or resources anymore. It's a permanent war on stability itself. And if that's the new game, how does it ever actually end?
I want you to close your eyes for a second. Picture yourself back in a neon-lit arcade. It's loud, it's chaotic.
Okay.
And you're standing in front of that glass-kicking Whac A Mole. You got that heavy padded mallet in your hand.
Right. And the music starts to speed up.
It speeds up, and those little plastic moles, they start popping up faster than you can possibly hit them. It's frantic, it's sweaty. It is designed specifically to make you lose your cool.
To make you panic.
Exactly. Now take that image, hold it, but replace the arcade cabinet with the entire globe. Replace the mallet with the trillion-dollar might of the U.S. military.
And the moles?
The moles are geopolitical crises, specifically crafted to drain the life right out of a superpower.
That is the central, and I have to say, terrifying metaphor of the document we are looking at today. And honestly, we go through a lot of source stacks on this show, a lot of heavy reading. This is the one that actually kept me staring at the ceiling last night.
I am right there with you. It feels a little too real, a little too close. So today we're doing a deep dive into a document found in our stack titled The Infinite Front.
And we should be clear for everyone listening, this isn't a history book.
No, it's not a report on a war that has already happened. It's a narrative scenario. Think of it as a very sophisticated what-if roadmap, a blueprint for how two superpowers could dismantle a third without ever declaring direct war.
It's a simulation, essentially, but it's written with such cold mathematical logic that it feels less like fiction and more like, I don't know, a weather forecast for a storm that's already brewing.
The core premise is just devastatingly simple. The United States is a giant. You can't fight a giant head-on.
You'll get crushed. The budget's too big, the military's too strong, but you can stimulate its nerve endings. You can irritate it, distract it, and force it to flail around until it just exhausts itself.
It's global whack-a-mole. But instead of winning tickets for a plastic spider ring, the prize is global hegemony.
Precisely. And to understand how this game is played, you have to understand the players. The scenario is driven by two very specific characters. On one side, you have Viktor Volkov.
The Russian element, let's unpack him first. He's not just some generic general, is he?
No, not at all. Volkov is like a piece of glowing history. He's a legend of the SVR Russian foreign intelligence. He's 68, a veteran of the old KGB days.
So he's old school.
Very. He drinks vodka, he quotes history, and his primary motivation is humiliation. He remembers 1991, the fall of the Soviet Union, not as a geopolitical event, but as a deep personal insult. He represents the analog school of warfare. Psychological manipulation, spies, the human element.
He wants to hurt the West emotionally, which is such a fascinating contrast with the other guy, Chen.
Right. Chen is the modern face of this alliance. He's 42, with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, the MSS, but he's not a spy in a trench coat. He's a technocrat. He went to MIT.
So he sees the world differently.
Completely. To him, the world isn't about ideology or revenge. It's a data set. He views democracy not as a philosophy, but as an operating system. And like any operating system, he believes it has bugs.
That line in the text stopped me cold.
Yeah.
Democracy is an operating system with bugs. To us, things like free speech and public debate, those are features, right?
They are features to us, but to an adversary like Chen, they're vulnerabilities. Think about it. In an autocracy, if the public gets angry, the government can ignore them, suppress them, whatever. But in a democracy, the government must respond to public outrage. That responsiveness is the core contract.
So Chen's plan is to hack that responsiveness.
Exactly. If he can create the outrage, he can force the government to move. That's the bug he wants to exploit.
It's chilling. So, okay, let's track this mission they cook up. We're going to follow the timeline from a snowy dacha in Moscow all the way to a fiery catastrophe in the North Atlantic.
It starts in the winter of 2024. Outside Moscow, the source paints this heavy scene snow, isolation, a holographic globe shimmering over a table.
And what's the analysis?
Volkov points out the obvious. The U.S. military budget is over $800 billion. He says, we can't touch that head on. A Cold War 2.0 is suicide.
And this is where Chen brings in his nerve endings theory.
Right. He pulls up that globe. He argues the U.S. has stretched its national interests everywhere. Every alliance, every trade route, every base. Those are exposed nerves. And he proposes stimulating them randomly and all at once. The goal isn't to win a battle.
It's to make the U.S. run around whacking moles until it loses its judgment.
Until, as Volkov puts it, it starts hitting its own limbs.
So the plan is set. This brings us to mole number 1, the backyard. Timeline moves to early 2026.
They decide to hit the U.S. where it feels safest, the Western Hemisphere, the Americas. This is smart because it bypasses the military brain and goes straight for the political reptile brain of Washington.
And they don't do it with an invasion. It's way subtler. The source lists 3 specific triggers. First, a huge deep-water port in Chen, Peru.
Which is a real place, by the way, a real project. But in this scenario, they dial it up. Suddenly, there are satellite photos of Chinese naval supply ships docking there. It implies a permanent foothold.
And at the same time.
At the same time, Russian S-400 missile systems appear in Venezuela and Nicaragua. And old Soviet-era spy stations in Cuba are reactivated, listening in on Florida.
So if you're in Washington, this feels like the Cuban Missile Crisis all over again.
That's precisely the reaction they want. The source describes absolute panic. But it's not just military panic, it's political. You have to remember the context midterm elections are coming up.
The administration can't afford to look weak on home soil.
Exactly. It's not just a security threat, it's an electoral death sentence.
And this is where we meet a key character, our eyes and ears in the White House. Sarah Miller. She's a senior director at the NSC.
And she's the tragic figure of reason in all this. She looks at the raw intelligence data, and she sees that the Chinese naval movements they're just too loud.
Too obvious.
Yeah, the encryption is lazy. They are practically broadcasting their location. She tells her bosses, they want us to see them. It's a feint. They're trying to draw our resources away from Asia.
She sees the trap, but nobody listens. Why?
Because of that bug we talked about. The chief of staff shuts her down with a line that it defines modern politics. Truth doesn't matter. Perception does.
Wow.
To save their political skins, they order the redeployment. They pull attack submarines and Aegis destroyers from the Pacific, specifically the 7th Fleet, and send them to the Caribbean.
I just want to pause on that because that is a massive move. The 7th Fleet is the shield against China.
It's a huge strategic shift. It's the definition of overreaction. They've moved the giant shield to protect against a bluff, and just as all American eyes turn south, pop.
Mole number 2 occurs. The sandbox. The Middle East.
The timing is impeccable, coordinated to the hour. Just as the U.S. Navy is steaming toward the Caribbean, Iran activates something called Code Sandstorm.
And the whole region just explodes.
It's not one thing, it's everything at once. Hezbollah fires thousands of missiles at Haifa and Tel Aviv. The Houthis swarm Red Sea shipping. Israel feels an existential threat and launches a massive ground invasion. It's the beginning of the 5th Middle East War.
And once again, the U.S. is trapped by its own commitments.
Right. Political pressure, treaty obligations, the sheer necessity of keeping shipping lanes open. It all forces the U.S. to commit. They have to send carrier groups to the Med and the Red Sea immediately.
So let's look at the board now. U.S. assets are in the Caribbean, protecting the homeland. They're in the Middle East, protecting allies. What's left in the Pacific?
Nothing. Or close to it. It's a ghost town. Chen Wei, watching from Beijing, notes that the U.S. 7th Fleet is now hollowed out. The giant is exhausted. It's holding down 2 moles with 2 hands. It has no hands left.
And this is the moment. This is what Volkov calls his masterpiece. The physical exhaustion is complete. Now they pivot to psychological poisoning.
Mole number 3, the Arctic. This is where the story gets really disturbing. We've been talking about hardware ships, missiles. This attack is what they call cognitive warfare.
It's not a bomb, it's a story.
It's a weaponized narrative. The source describes a Bureau 713 in Hangzhou using AI to generate deepfakes. But they're smart. They don't just invent things out of thin air. They take a kernel of past truth.
A dark historical chapter about Danish forced contraception practices among the Inuit in Greenland.
Exactly. They revive a real trauma, but they enhance it with synthetic media. They use AI to create fake testimonials.
And this is where that buggy operating system comes back into play, right? They don't send the same message to everyone.
No, they use algorithmic targeting to split the U.S. population. For the liberal demographic on TikTok, Instagram, they push these heartbreaking AI-generated videos of Inuit women crying about stolen futures. It's optimized for empathy.
Hits that justice trigger. And for conservatives.
A completely different narrative. On Facebook and X, it's about godless Europeans destroying life and traditional values. A moral and religious outrage.
So you have the entire U.S. political spectrum, which usually can't agree on anything, suddenly united in hatred against Denmark.
Their own NATO ally. It sounds absurd, but think how fast online outrage moves. Sarah Miller sees her own daughter fall for it. Her daughter sends her a message saying, "Mom, how can we be allies with these monsters?"
And she can't convince her it's fake.
The emotional hook is too deep. The public demands action. They want the U.S. to do something. So the president, trying to ride the wave, offers Greenland $6 billion for protection.
Which is that's bullying. That's a hostile move against a friend.
It's aggressive diplomacy born of panic. And Denmark is obviously offended. They block their waters. They send a frigate to patrol. And now you have a standoff. A U.S. transport ship and a Danish frigate facing off in the icy waters of the North Atlantic.
This brings us to the climax. The fire at sea, fall 2026. And this is where the unseen player lights the match.
The Russian submarine. The invisible hand. The source mentions a specific technology here, AI spoofing.
Can you break that down?
Sure. Every ship transmits a digital signal AIS saying, "Here I am." Spoofing is hacking that signal to make ships appear where they aren't, but the Russian sub does more. It uses electronic warfare to project a ghost signal onto the Danish ship's radar.
So what does the Danish captain see?
He doesn't see a transport ship. He sees an incoming anti-ship missile on his screen. He thinks he's about to die.
He has seconds to react.
It's fight or die. He orders his ship to fire defensive rounds to intercept what he thinks is a missile.
And because there is no missile.
Those rounds fly past the ghost signal and hit the U.S. transport ship.
Chaos. Absolute chaos. So back in the Situation Room, Sarah Miller sees the raw data.
She sees it. The electronic signatures match a Russian Kilo-class sub. She knows it was a trick. She runs to the red phone to stop the U.S. retaliation. She's screaming, "Don't shoot, it wasn't them!"
This feels like the moment where the hero saves the day.
Except she doesn't, and this is the twist that really hurts. She's stopped by the CIA director.
But why? If they knew it was Russia, why let the U.S. attack an ally?
This is the most cynical part of the document. The director explains that admitting the U.S. Navy was tricked by a Russian sub is too humiliating. It would destroy American prestige. It would make the giant look stupid.
So they choose the lie.
They choose the lie. To preserve the appearance of strength, they stick to the narrative that Denmark attacked. The U.S. retaliates. And in that exchange of fire, NATO, the 75-year-old alliance, just burns down.
The giant was so afraid of looking foolish that it destroyed its own alliance. It punched itself in the face because it didn't want to admit it flinched.
And that is the ultimate victory of managed chaos. They didn't have to sink the U.S. fleet. They just had to create the conditions for the U.S. to sink its own alliances.
So let's fast forward. The New World Order, 2027. The dust settles. What does the world look like?
It's bleak for the West. The U.S. is described as bankrupt isolationist. The Monroe Doctrine returns, "We stay in our hemisphere, you stay in yours." Sarah Miller quits. She's teaching history, chronicling the fall of the empire she tried to save.
And in Asia, the original target.
Silence. While the U.S. was busy in the Caribbean, the Middle East, and the Arctic, China has peacefully absorbed Taiwan and the South China Sea. No war was needed. There was just nobody there to stop them.
And Europe.
Fractured. Without NATO, European nations are scrambling to make individual peace deals with Russia. The EU is broken.
So back at the dacha, Volkov is taking a victory lap.
He is. He says, "We didn't defeat America. We just made America defeat itself by chasing every distraction." He toasts to multipolar chaos.
But the story doesn't end there, does it? The epilogue.
Yeah.
That's what really sticks with you.
Yes. The infinite game. You'd think they would celebrate. But Chen isn't celebrating. He's cold. He's already looking at his tablet. He just swipes to the next target.
India.
India. He pulls up data on caste violence, religious friction. He calls India the next elephant that needs to chase its own tail.
And Volkov is stunned by this.
Even the old Russian spy is creeped out. He realizes that for Chen, this wasn't about revenge or glory. It's about bug fixing. As long as humanity exists with its passions and divisions, there are bugs to exploit. The game of whack-a-mole never, ever ends.
So we've walked through this nightmare scenario. It's heavy. But why does this matter to the person listening right now? We aren't admirals. We don't control the Seventh Fleet.
I think the most important takeaway isn't the military hardware. It's not the missiles or the submarine. It's the method.
The cognitive warfare.
Exactly. The scariest weapon in this entire story wasn't a bomb. It was the made-up tears in those deepfake videos. It was the weaponization of empathy. They used our own values, human rights, justice, patriotism against us. They turned our virtues into vulnerabilities.
It makes you question everything you see on your feed. It suggests that if you're feeling an intense, immediate emotional reaction to something, you might be the mole.
That's the critical lesson. In a world of cognitive warfare, your outrage is a fuel source for someone else's strategy. If you see something that makes you instantly furious, you have to ask yourself, is this real? Or is this just another mole popping up, designed to make me waste my energy?
Is someone trying to get the giant to punch itself out?
Precisely. The scenario shows that a superpower, or even just a person, fails not when they are weak, but when they react to every single provocation instead of sticking to a strategy.
That is a heavy thought to leave you with, but a necessary one. Next time you feel that spike of anger at a headline, maybe just take a breath.
Don't whack the mole, just watch it and see who's holding the mallet.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.